Late last year, President Barack Obama announced the U.S. would begin normalizing diplomatic relations with Cuba. Earlier this month, AgriPulse reported more than 30 farm groups and agribusinesses had launched a coalition to end a trade embargo and increase trade there. Nebraska Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubben joined us Thursday to discuss ag trade opportunities in Cuba, as well as give an update on trade with Europe and Asia. We began by asking where Cuba stood on the agenda.
Well, it was interesting when the president announced plans to sort of reopen discussions with Cuba. It really is more about diplomacy than it is about trade, but it certainly highlighted the trade prospects as well. And there's some thought that it's not a big market. We wouldn't expect it to suddenly become a major destination for U.S. ag exports. But for some commodities, some basic staples, there's opportunity. And that might include some Nebraska commodities like dry beans that have already gone to Cuba.
How far away is that, though?
You can imagine it's several years away before you really develop the scale of a market that could be imagined. And that's if we really do proceed with sort of much more open relationships. Right now it's a promise to begin to bridge those relationships. We're a long ways away from expecting a major economic impact.
This week we heard some commodity groups talking about Trade Promotion Authority and wanting the president to have that ability. Tell me what Trade Promotion Authority is. Well,
really we can say the president's mention of Cuba and then his mention in the State of the Union address of the need for Trade Promotion Authority has really promoted trade to the forefront of some of the potential agenda here. The president might negotiate and continue and even finish negotiations in the Asia region with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He might continue negotiations in Europe with the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, but it's really difficult to finish those things if he doesn't have Trade Promotion Authority.
Which is what?
So what is it?
Yeah.
It effectively says Congress grants the administration authority to negotiate trade agreements and then reserves the right to vote them up or down. Without Trade Promotion Authority, the president could talk all he wants and even negotiate agreements, but any one of those agreements is really sort of subject to amendment and discussion and changes in Congress when Congress tries to pass it. If Congress can change it, then you're really not negotiating in full faith. It's hard to imagine any agreement really coming to fruition.
Does support follow along party lines with something like this?
It's rather interesting. The history of Trade Promotion Authority seems to be that Republicans won't trust a Democratic president with authority and Democrats won't trust a Republican president with authority. In this case, you might see a pro-trade primary Republican delegation in Congress that wants to move forward and is willing to walk with a Democratic president who's asking for that authority to move an agenda forward. You will have factions perhaps on both ends of the spectrum that aren't happy with the trade prospects or aren't happy with the authority going to this president, but if you can find enough support in the middle, you could imagine it moving.
You touched on this, but in Europe and Asia, what potential opportunities could it give? And just give me an update on what's happening.
Yeah, those are the two big arenas for potential trade negotiations. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership is potentially huge as a block of trading nations. But the biggest obstacle remains discussions between the U.S. and Japan, and particularly about Japan's protections of some basic commodities, what they call their sacred commodities. Think of rice and beef and pork and wheat, a group of sacred commodities that have rather high tariffs that keep out U.S. product. If we're going to see an agreement, we're going to have to see some negotiation where Japan begins to open up those markets. There are other issues in Japan beyond agriculture as well. There are issues in Europe as well. Big agricultural issues such as hormones in meat production, genetically modified ag products and food products, what we call the geographical indicators, Europe's insistence on protection of place names in food brands as a trademark, even though those place names have become something of a generic definition for a food product. So lots of issues in both regions, lots of work yet to happen, but TPA certainly might move us further down the road.